The vault door had not moved in 30 years, and neither had she. Mirga Brighttusk stood at her post in the deep heart of Ironridge Hold, her green hands folded behind her back, her tusked jaw set in a line that had not softened since the day the Merchants' Guild had sealed her inside with their fortune. The gold lay stacked behind iron and stone, silent as the mountain itself, and she had become part of the architecture. Guards came and went at the outer gates. Guildmasters aged and retired. The world above turned through seasons. She knew only by the dampness in the air that seeped down the carved stone corridors. None of it moved her. She was 48 years old. She had been 18 when they offered her the contract, a young orc woman with no family and nothing to lose, blessed with a reputation for immovable stubbornness even then. The pay was extraordinary. The terms were clear. 30 years guarding the central vault, living in the small chamber adjacent, never leaving her post for more than the minimum necessary for bodily function, never accepting bribes, never permitting entry except by the strictest protocol. She had signed in her careful hand and watched them seal the outer doors. In the early years, they had tested her. A silk merchant had offered her a chest of silver. A mining baron had threatened to have her dragged out and thrown from the mountain. A young clerk had wept and begged, claiming his family would starve if he could not access funds he swore were rightfully his. She had refused them all with the same words: "Show me the proper documentation and the 3 required seals, or turn back." Eventually, they stopped trying. Mirga Brighttusk became a legend of incorruptibility, the orc woman who could not be moved by any force in the world. The truth was simpler. She had nowhere else to go, and the gold meant nothing to her. It was just metal. Her life was just time. One was as heavy and meaningless as the other. On a spring morning in her 30th year of service, measured by the calendar she kept scratched into the wall of her sleeping chamber, Mirga heard unfamiliar footsteps approaching down the corridor. Not the heavy boots of the perimeter guards who came once a week with her rations. Not the shuffling gait of old Grimwald, the record-keeper who descended once a month to verify the seals. These steps were lighter, hesitant, accompanied by a soft scraping sound she could not identify. She straightened, though she had not been slouching. Her hand moved to the iron staff that leaned against the wall beside her, though she had never needed to use it. The footsteps came closer, and then around the corner came a human man she had never seen before. He was tall but not unusually so, perhaps 6 feet, with brown hair that fell past his collar and the lean build of someone who worked with his hands but not at forge or anvil. He wore simple wool clothing, travel-stained, and carried in his arms a wooden crate filled with small plants, their leaves bright green against his chest. He stopped when he saw her, clearly startled by her presence even though she stood directly in the center of the corridor, unmissable. "Forgive me," he said, his voice quiet and steady. "I did not realize anyone was posted here. I am looking for the inner courtyard. They told me to follow the left passage from the main hall, but I think I have become turned around." Mirga regarded him with the flat expression she had perfected over 3 decades. "You have gone too far. The courtyard entrance is 3 corridors back, then up the eastern stair." He shifted the crate in his arms, glancing at the plants as if checking they had not been disturbed by his error. "Thank you. I apologize for the intrusion. This is a restricted area. Who gave you permission to be in the hold?" "The guildmasters hired me," he said, meeting her eyes directly. Most humans could not hold her gaze for long, made uncomfortable by the directness of it, or by her tusks, or by the simple fact of her greenness. This man simply looked at her as if she were a person he was speaking to, which she supposed she was. "My name is Warren Emery. I am a horticulturist." The inner courtyard has been neglected for years and they want it restored. I arrived yesterday. I see. She did see, in fact. The guild masters had been complaining about the state of the courtyard for the past 2 years, ever since a visiting dignitary had made a cutting remark about the hold looking like a tomb. But hiring someone to actually tend it was new. The eastern stair. Do not come down this corridor again. I will not, he said, and then he did something she had not expected. He smiled at her, a brief warming of his features that seemed genuine rather than ingratiating. It is good to meet you, though. I had not realized there was anyone living this deep in the hold. Before she could respond, he had turned and retraced his steps, the scraping sound resolving itself into the wooden crate brushing against his hip as he walked. In moments, he was gone, and she was alone again with the gold and the silence. She told herself it meant nothing. A lost gardener. A brief exchange. It would not happen again. 3 days later, he came down the corridor deliberately, carrying nothing, and stopped a respectful distance from her post. I wanted to apologize again, Warren said. I asked about the layout of the hold and they told me about the vault. I understand now why you stopped me. I truly did not mean to intrude on a secured area. You have apologized already. There is no need to do so again. Still. He hesitated, then said, They told me you have been here for 30 years. That seems like a long time to stand guard. It is the term of my contract. It must be lonely. No one had ever said that to her before. They praised her dedication. They marveled at her discipline. They whispered about her stubbornness and her inhuman patience. But no one had suggested that 3 decades alone in the dark with nothing but gold for company might be lonely. She did not know how to respond, so she said nothing. Warren seemed to understand. He nodded once and turned to leave. The courtyard, Mirga said, surprising herself. Is it in poor condition? He paused and looked back. Yes, the soil is depleted and full of stones. Most of the old plantings have died, but the bones are good. With work it will be beautiful again. I see. If you ever wanted to see it, once I have made some progress, I could describe the way. It is not far from here, just up and around. I imagine you cannot leave your post, though. No, she said. I cannot. He nodded again, something like sadness crossing his face, and left. The next morning, Mirga found a single flower lying on the floor outside her sleeping chamber, placed just far enough from the vault door to be clearly meant for her rather than some kind of security breach. It was a small thing, white petals streaked with purple, and she had no idea what it was called. She picked it up, puzzled. No note, no explanation, just the flower. She put it in the cup of water. She kept by her bedside and said nothing when Warren passed through the outer corridor later that day, heading to the surface with a basket of stones. The second flower appeared 3 days later. Yellow this time, with a thick stem and a heavy head that bent under its own weight. She added it to the cup. After the 5th flower, a pale pink bloom with a scent like honey, she stopped him when he passed. Why are you doing this? She asked. Warren paused, a shovel balanced on his shoulder. Doing what? Leaving flowers. Oh, he had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, a flush rising in his tan cheeks. I did not realize it was unwelcome. I can stop. I did not say it was unwelcome. I asked why. He set the shovel down, leaning it against the corridor wall, and considered his words. You have been here for 30 years, he said finally. That is a long time to be surrounded by stone and metal. I thought you might like to see something that grows. It was such a simple answer, and so alien to everything she had known in this place, that Mirga did not know what to say. Warren seemed to take her silence as dismissal. I will stop if you prefer, he said, reaching for the shovel again. You do not have to stop. He smiled that warm smile again and picked up his tool. Then I will not, Over the following weeks, the flowers continued. Sometimes they came daily, sometimes with a few days between, depending, she assumed, on what was blooming in the courtyard above. Warren began to nod to her when he passed, and she began to nod back. It was not much. It was more than she had had in 3 decades. One evening, as he returned from the surface with dirt under his fingernails and exhaustion in the set of his shoulders, she spoke to him again. "What are you planting?" He stopped immediately, as if he had been waiting for her to ask. "Right now, I am working on the herb beds, thyme and sage and mint. They are hardy and will fill in the bare spaces. There is a cherry tree in the corner that I think can be saved if I can cut away the dead wood and give it better drainage. And I am planting a rose arbor along the southern wall, though that will not bloom until next year." "Roses," she repeated. She had not seen a rose in 30 years. "Do you like roses?" "I do not know. I think I did before I came here. It is hard to remember." Warren looked at her for a long moment, and there was something in his gaze that made her want to turn away, except she had not turned away from anything in 3 decades, and she was not going to start now. "I will bring you a rose," he said quietly, "when they bloom. That is a promise." He kept his word in all things. She was beginning to understand that about him. The flowers became conversation, brief exchanges as Warren came and went. He told her about the progress in the courtyard, the way the soil was coming back to life, the surprise of finding bulbs buried deep that no one had known were there. She told him, in her spare way, about the vault. The weight of the door, 3 men required to open it with the proper keys. The way the gold was organized, each merchant house's share marked and separated. The silence. "You ever wish you could leave?" Warren asked her one afternoon, sitting on the floor of the corridor with his back against the wall, too tired from hauling stones to stand, but apparently not tired enough to head to his own quarters without resting first. "It is not a matter of wishing. It is a matter of contract." "But if the contract did not exist, if you could choose?" Mirga considered the question, really considered it for the first time in years. "I do not know," she said honestly. "This has been my life for so long. I am not certain I remember how to be anywhere else. You could learn, perhaps." He looked up at her, shading his eyes against the lamplight. "What will you do when the 30 years are finished? That must be soon now." 4 months, she said. 123 days, you are counting. I have always counted, and then. The guild will release me from the contract. I will receive my final payment. I suppose I will find other work. Guarding something else. It is what I know how to do. Warren shook his head slowly. That seems like a waste. She bristled, her tusks catching the light as she lifted her chin. A waste of what? I am very good at what I do. I know. I did not mean it that way. He stood, brushing dust from his trousers. I only meant that you are clearly capable of great dedication and discipline. You could dedicate yourself to anything. It seems a shame to dedicate yourself to the same locked door over and over. What would you suggest instead? I do not know. What do you care about? The question stopped her. She could not remember the last time anyone had asked her what she cared about, or if anyone ever had. Her entire adult life had been built around caring about nothing, wanting nothing, being moved by nothing. I do not know, she admitted. Warren's expression softened. Then maybe you should find out. He left her with that thought, and it troubled her more than she wanted to admit. The seasons turned. Warren's courtyard began to take shape, though Mirga saw it only through his descriptions and the flowers he brought. The cherry tree bloomed, and he carried down an armful of the branches, filling her chamber with petals that drifted down like snow. The herbs began to spread, and her flowers came with the scent of thyme and rosemary still clinging to his hands. He was happy in his work. She could see it in the way he moved, the satisfaction in his voice when he described a successful grafting or a bed finally cleared of rocks. And she began to realize, slowly and then all at once, that she looked forward to his footsteps in the corridor. That the flowers had become the marker by which she measured her days, more important than the scratch marks on her wall. That when he smiled at her, something in her chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with duty or discipline. She was falling in love with Warren Emery, and she had no idea what to do about it. The problem was that she had nothing to offer him. No life, no home, no future beyond these stone walls. She was an orc woman who had spent 30 years becoming a piece of furniture, and he was a man who made things grow. What could possibly come of that? So she said nothing, and the days continued. 100 days left. Warren brought her the first rose, a deep red bloom with a scent that filled the corridor. She held it carefully, aware that her hands had held nothing but iron and stone for so long they had almost forgotten softness. "It is beautiful," she said. "You should see the whole arbor. There are dozens of them now. I am glad your work is going well." He looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "Mirga, will you tell me something honestly?" She stiffened, slightly wary. "If I can. You want to leave this place?" The question again, but this time it felt weighted with more than curiosity. She met his eyes and saw something there that made her heart lurch. "Why are you asking me this?" "Because I need to know if you are staying out of duty or desire. I need to know if the chains are real or if you have just convinced yourself they are. The contract is real. The contract ends in 100 days. I am not asking about the contract." Mirga turned away, facing the vault door, the thing she had looked at every day for 3 decades. "I do not know what I want," she said quietly. "I have not let myself want anything for so long." She heard him move closer, felt his presence at her shoulder. "Then maybe it is time to start." "Warren, I am in love with you," he said, the words simple and direct, and the world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "I have been for months. I wake up thinking about you. I choose flowers based on which ones I think will make you smile, even though you almost never smile. I time my work so I have an excuse to pass through this corridor, just to see you. And I know this is foolish. I know you have a life here and a duty, but I had to tell you before your contract ends and you disappear to guard someone else's gold somewhere else." She turned to face him, her breath caught in her throat. "You cannot love me. You barely know me. I know you have stood at this post for 30 years without faltering. I know you are the most disciplined person I have ever met. I know you remember the name of every flower I bring you. I know you put them in water and keep them until they wilt. I know you are lonely and strong and deserving of so much more than a locked door in the dark. I am an orc. I am aware. It is not done. Humans and orcs, it is not acceptable. I do not care. You should care. There will be consequences. Let there be consequences." He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away, and took her hand. His fingers were warm and rough with calluses from his tools, and she realized with a shock that no one had touched her with gentleness in 30 years. "Mirga, I am not asking you to decide anything right now. I am only asking you to think about it. When your contract ends, you do not have to find another vault. You could come with me instead." "Come with you where?" "Anywhere. Everywhere. I am a gardener. I can find work anywhere things grow. We could go to the southern valleys or the coast or a frontier homestead that needs land cleared and planted. We could have a garden of our own. I do not know anything about gardens. You could learn." He squeezed her hand gently. "I know this is sudden. I know it is a lot. But I had to tell you. I could not let you walk away without you knowing that someone wants you for more than your ability to stand still and say no." She wanted to tell him it was impossible. She wanted to tell him he was a fool. Instead, she found herself squeezing his hand back, her green fingers folding around his. "I will think about it," she whispered. He smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through after a long winter. "That is all I ask." He left her there, and she stood at her post with her heart hammering in her chest, staring at the vault door and seeing it clearly for the first time in 3 decades. Just metal, just a door, just someone else's gold, and she had given it 30 years of her life. The next morning, Mirga found a small bundle outside her chamber. Wrapped in cloth were seeds, dozens of them, each type separated into a twist of paper with the name written in Warren's careful hand. Carrots, beans, sunflowers, peas. There was a note tucked among them. "These are easy to start and hard to kill. If you decide you want to learn, these would be a good beginning. No pressure, no expectation, just possibility." She sat on the edge of her narrow bed with the seeds spread before her and felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been frozen for 3 decades beginning to thaw. The next time Warren came down the corridor, she stopped him. "Tell me about the courtyard," she said. "Not just what you are planting, what it looks like. The light, the stone, all of it." He sat down immediately, settling against the wall as if he had been waiting for this invitation, and he told her. He described the way the morning sun came over the eastern wall and lit the herbs until they glowed. The sound of water in the small fountain he had repaired, stone on stone, a constant burble that echoed off the enclosed space. The way the roses had climbed the arbor, creating a tunnel of red and pink and white. The cherry tree now healthy, its branches spreading wide enough to offer shade to the bench beneath it. "There is a bench. I built one. I thought someone should be able to sit and enjoy the space. I sit there sometimes in the evening when the work is done. It sounds beautiful. It is." He paused, then said, "You could see it, you know. Your post is to guard the vault, not to never move from this exact spot. The courtyard is still within the hold. It would not violate your contract." "I have never left this corridor. I know, but you could." The idea terrified her. She had not walked more than 20 paces in any direction in 30 years. Her entire world was this corridor, her sleeping chamber, the vault door. Everything beyond that was theoretical, remembered dimly from a youth that felt like it belonged to someone else. But she found herself thinking about it. The courtyard, the light, the bench where Warren sat in the evenings, 75 days left on her contract. The guild masters came down for their quarterly inspection. 3 stern-faced humans who checked the seals and verified the inventory, and nodded their approval at her, as if she were a piece of particularly well-maintained equipment. Warren was not with them, but she heard his voice in the distance, speaking to someone about soil amendments and mulch. When they were finished and departing up the corridor, the lead master, a jowly man named Aldrich whom she had known for 20 years, paused. "We have been pleased with your service, Mirga," he said stiffly. "When your contract completes, we hope you will consider a renewal. Another 30 years, the terms would be even more generous." She stared at him. "Another 30 years. Your reliability is unmatched. We would hate to train a replacement. I would be 78 years old when it ended. Indeed, a comfortable retirement to look forward to. Think on it." He nodded and walked away, as if he had offered her a gift rather than a second lifetime sentence. That evening, Warren found her standing at her post, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "What happened?" he asked immediately, reading her face. "They want me to sign another 30-year contract." He went very still. "What did you tell them?" "I told them I would think on it." "That is what one says. Mirga." He stepped closer, his voice urgent. "You are not actually considering it." "I do not know. It is a generous offer. The pay, damn the pay. You have been paid for 30 years, and what has it bought you? This corridor, this door. It bought me security, purpose." It bought you a cage. He took her hands, gripped tight. Listen to me. You have given them 30 years. You do not owe them another 30. You do not owe them even one more day beyond what you contracted. What else would I do? I am not young anymore. I am not trained for anything but this. You could come with me. I meant what I said. I love you. I want to build a life with you. A life doing what? Standing in your garden useless while you work, learning, he said fiercely. Growing. Living. Anything but standing here guarding metal that does not care whether you exist. She pulled her hands away, turning back to the vault. You do not understand. This is not just duty. This is who I am. I am the orc who cannot be moved. I am the one who stands firm. Without that, what am I? You are Mirga, he said softly. And that is enough. She wanted to believe him. But 30 years of identity did not crumble in a moment, no matter how much her heart ached. The next weeks were strained. Warren still brought flowers, but the easy conversations had become tense. He was waiting for an answer she could not give. She was caught between the life she knew and the life he offered, unable to choose, terrified of both. 50 days left. She stood at her post and imagined 50 more days of this, then another 11,000 days after that. Another 30 years of stone and gold and silence. She thought about Warren sitting on his bench in the courtyard, watching the roses bloom, growing old without her. She thought about the seeds he had given her, still wrapped in their paper, untouched. 40 days left. Warren stopped bringing flowers. He passed through the corridor only when necessary for his work, and he did not meet her eyes. The silence between them was worse than the 30 years before had been, because now she knew what she was missing. 30 days left. A month. The guild sent down the paperwork for the contract renewal, thick parchment with spaces for her signature, the terms laid out in careful script. 60 gold coins per year, double her current rate. All provisions provided. A one-time bonus upon completion. And at the end, another 30 years of her life gone. She stared at the parchment and felt nothing but emptiness. 20 days left. Warren came down the corridor carrying his tools, heading for some task in the upper levels. He glanced at her and the hurt in his eyes made something in her chest twist. Warren, wait. He stopped but did not turn. I am afraid, she said, the words dragged out of her. I have been here for so long. What if I leave and I am no good at anything else? What if I fail? He turned then, setting down his tools and walking back to her. Then you fail, and you try something else. That is what life is. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. He reached up and cupped her face in his hand, thumb brushing the edge of her jaw. I know you are afraid, but staying here because you are afraid is not the same as staying because you want to. I do not want to stay, she whispered, admitting it finally, the words like a dam breaking. I have not wanted to stay for years, but I did not know how to leave. Leave with me. It is that simple. What if you change your mind? What if you decide I am not worth the trouble? I will not. You cannot know that. I know that I have been in love with you for months and it has only grown stronger. I know that you are the bravest person I have ever met, standing here alone for 30 years. I know that courage does not disappear just because you change what you are guarding. And I know that I want to wake up every morning next to you and teach you the names of flowers and watch you discover what you care about. She kissed him then, pulling him close with hands that had not touched another person with tenderness in 3 decades, and he kissed her back like she was precious. When they broke apart, she was shaking. I do not know how to do this, she said. Neither do I. We will figure it out together. 10 days left. Mirga made her decision. She went to the guild masters and told them she would not be renewing her contract. There would be no second 30 years. When her term ended, she was leaving. They were not pleased. Aldrich's face went red, and he argued about duty and commitment and the difficulty of finding a replacement. She listened with the same unmovable patience she had brought to 30 years of guarding, and then she said no. Just no. Simple and final. When they threatened to withhold her final payment to blacken her name, to make sure she never worked for any merchant guild again, she felt the fist of panic begin to close around her throat. And then she thought of Warren and his garden, and she said, "Do what you must. I am still leaving." They stormed out furious, and she realized something had shifted. The hold had been her whole world. Now it was just a place she worked. The difference was enormous. 5 days left. Warren came down the corridor and found her standing not at her post but a few feet away from it, her back to the vault. "I want to see the courtyard," she said. His face broke into a grin that could have lit the whole mountain. Now, while I am still brave enough." He offered her his hand and she took it, and together they walked up the corridor. Each step felt momentous. The eastern stair was narrow, and her legs protested the climb after years of standing still. Her heart hammered in her chest. But Warren's hand was warm in hers, and he kept looking back to make sure she was all right, and she kept going. The door to the courtyard was wooden, carved with vines and leaves. Warren pushed it open and light flooded in, real sunlight for the first time in 3 decades, and Mirga stopped in the doorway, momentarily blinded. When her eyes adjusted, she saw it. The courtyard was perhaps 30 paces across, enclosed by stone walls but open to the sky. The fountain bubbled in the center, water spilling over carved stone into a basin full of water lilies. The herb beds were lush and green, the scent of thyme and lavender heavy in the air. The cherry tree spread its branches wide, leaves rustling in a breeze she could actually feel on her skin. And along the southern wall, the rose arbor was a riot of color, red and pink and white and yellow, blooms so thick they nearly hid the structure beneath. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Warren led her to the bench beneath the cherry tree, and she sat down slowly, her legs weak. He sat beside her, not speaking, letting her take it in. "I did not remember," she said finally, her voice rough. "I did not remember the world was like this. You have been in the dark a long time." "Yes." She reached out and plucked a leaf from a low-hanging branch, rolling it between her fingers, marveling at the texture of it. "Warren, I need to tell you something. All right. I do not know how to be the person you think I am. I do not know how to be soft or gentle or any of the things someone should be in a relationship. I have been a wall for 30 years. I am not sure I know how to be anything else." He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Then we will figure it out as we go. I am not asking you to be someone else. I am asking you to try something new with me. I am afraid I will disappoint you. Impossible." She turned to look at him, this human man who had fallen in love with her over flowers and conversations in a dark corridor, and felt the weight of 30 years begin to lift. "Where will we go?" "I have been thinking about that," Warren said, his eyes lighting up. "There is a valley 2 days south of here, good soil and a long growing season. I have heard there is land available for homesteading. We could claim a piece, build a house, start a real garden, not just a courtyard but fields, an orchard, maybe some animals." "That sounds like a lot of work." "It does. I will need help," he grinned at her. "I know someone who is very good at commitment and seeing things through." Despite everything, she felt herself smile, a real smile, her tusks catching the light. "I suppose I could learn. I know you can." They sat together in the courtyard as the sun moved across the sky. And for the first time in 30 years, Mirga let herself imagine a future that was not measured in contracts and duty, but in growing seasons and shared work, and the simple, impossible joy of being wanted not for what she could guard, but for who she was. The last day of her contract arrived. Mirga stood at her post for the final time, watching as the guild masters came down with the replacement guard, a young orc man with nervous eyes and a stiff back. They walked him through the protocols while she gathered her few possessions from her chamber. It did not take long. She had accumulated almost nothing in 30 years. Warren waited for her at the top of the eastern stair, a pack on his back and a smile on his face. Ready? She took one last look down the corridor toward the vault, that door she had stared at for 3 decades. She felt no nostalgia, no regret, only relief. "Yes," she said, "I am ready." They walked out of Ironridge Hold together into the spring sunlight, and Mirga breathed air that did not taste of stone and metal. The world was vast and bright and overwhelming, and she gripped Warren's hand tightly, anchoring herself. "All right," he asked. "No," she admitted, "but I will be." They made the journey south over 2 days, sleeping under the stars the first night, which was so overwhelming Mirga could barely sleep, staring up at the endless sky. Warren lay beside her, his hand in hers, and talked quietly about constellations and seasons and all the things she had missed while the world turned above her. The valley was everything he had described. Rolling hills covered in wild grass, a river cutting through the center, forest along the northern edge. There was a plot already marked out, unclaimed, with good southern exposure and a gentle slope for drainage. Warren paced it off while Mirga stood at the center and turned in a slow circle, taking it in. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it is a lot of empty space. For now, but we will fill it." He came to stand beside her. "A house here where the view is best, garden beds along the slope, an orchard up near the tree line, and over there I am thinking a workshop where I can do grafting and start seeds." "And what will I do?" He looked at her seriously. "Whatever you want. You could help with the planting, you could learn the work, or you could find something else entirely. This is your life now, Mirga. You get to choose." It was a terrifying and exhilarating thought. She reached down and dug her fingers into the soil, rich and dark and full of possibility. "Teach me," she said, so he did. They filed the claim on the land and began the work of building a life from nothing. Warren taught her how to read soil, how to plant seeds at the right depth, how to water and weed and judge when something was ready to harvest. She was clumsy at first, her hands more accustomed to iron than to seedlings, but she learned with the same fierce determination she had brought to guarding. When she made mistakes, and she made many, Warren was patient, showing her again and again until she understood. They built a house together, a simple structure but solid, with a bedroom and a main room and a porch that faced the garden. Mirga learned carpentry as she learned gardening, slowly and with many errors, but the work was satisfying in a way guarding had never been. At the end of each day she could see what she had accomplished. The walls rising, the roof taking shape, the garden beds filling with green. There were difficulties. The nearest village was a day's ride, and when they went to buy supplies, the stares and whispers followed them. A human and an orc together. It was not done. The shopkeeper was cold, the other customers gave them a wide berth. Warren ignored it with the ease of someone who had decided he did not care what others thought. Mirga, used to 3 decades of solitude, found it easier than she expected. Let them stare. She had a home to build. They were not without friends, though. A frontier family, the Carters, lived an hour's walk to the west, and they proved to be kind and practical people who cared more about whether someone could be relied on than what color their skin was. When Mirga and Warren needed help raising the heavy roof beams, Robert Carter came with his 2 grown sons and worked alongside them without comment. His wife, Elise, brought bread and showed Mirga how to bake, standing patiently in the half-built kitchen and explaining the mysteries of yeast and kneading. You will get the feel for it, Elise said, her weathered hands guiding Mirga's through the motion. Bread is forgiving. It wants to rise. Mirga, who had spent 30 years in a place where nothing grew and nothing changed, found herself fascinated by the process. The way the dough swelled under the cloth, the smell of it baking, the satisfaction of pulling a loaf from the oven, imperfect but edible. I made bread, she told Warren that evening, presenting the slightly lopsided loaf with pride. He tore off a piece and ate it, grinning. It is delicious. It is passable. Then you will make better next time. That is how this works. Summer came and the garden exploded into life. The beans climbed their poles. The tomatoes swelled heavy on the vine. The herbs spread until they were cutting armfuls for drying. Mirga worked from dawn to dusk, learning to judge when something needed water or shade, when pests needed to be dealt with, when harvest could not wait another day. Her hands, which had held nothing but a staff for 3 decades, learned the feel of soil and stems and the weight of a full basket. She was happy. It surprised her every day, the sheer fact of her own happiness. She would catch herself smiling while pulling weeds, or laughing at something Warren said over dinner and marvel at the strangeness of it. This was her life now, not standing still, not guarding, just living. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the valley, the sky turning colors she had forgotten existed. Warren would talk about his plans for the orchard, the apple and pear trees he wanted to plant, the grapes that might grow along the southern fence. Mirga would listen, adding her own thoughts now, confident enough in her learning to have opinions. We should plant more root vegetables, she said one evening. Carrots and turnips, they store well for winter. Good thinking. We will need a root cellar. I could dig it. I am stronger than you. He laughed. I will not argue with that, but we dig it together. She leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his shoulder against hers, and thought about how strange and wonderful it was that this man had walked into a dark corridor carrying seedlings and changed everything. Warren, she said quietly. Yes, thank you. For what? For seeing me. For not letting me disappear into that vault forever. He turned to her, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. I did not do anything. You made the choice to leave. You gave me a reason to choose. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and she kissed him back, still learning the language of intimacy, but finding that, like gardening, it became easier with practice. Autumn arrived, and they spent weeks harvesting and preserving everything the garden had produced. The root cellar, dug together over the course of several backbreaking days, filled with carrots and turnips and potatoes. The shelves in the kitchen filled with jars of beans and tomatoes and jams made from the wild berries Warren had found along the forest edge. They worked side by side, efficient and practiced now. A team one evening as they finished sealing the last batch of preserves, Warren set down his spoon and looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. Mirga, I need to ask you something. She felt her stomach tighten with old instincts, waiting for the catch, the condition, the cost. What is it? Marry me. She stared at him. What? Marry me, he repeated, coming around the table to take her hands. I know we have not known each other long, not really. And I know this life is still new to you, but I love you and I want to build the rest of my life with you, not just as partners in a homestead, but as husband and wife. Warren, I am an orc. I am aware. It is not legal in some places. It will cause problems. I do not care about some places. I care about here. And here, I am asking you to be my wife. She looked down at their joined hands, his tanned skin against her green, and felt tears prick her eyes for the first time in 3 decades. I do not know how to be a wife. Neither do I, he said, grinning. But I am fairly sure we will figure it out. You are a fool, probably. Is that a yes? She pulled him close, wrapping her arms around him and burying her face in his shoulder. Yes, she said, her voice muffled against him. Yes, you ridiculous man. She felt him sag with relief, his arms tightening around her. I was not entirely certain you would say yes. Neither was I until I did. They married a week later in the Carters' homestead, with Robert acting as witness and Elise crying happy tears. There was no priest, no ceremony beyond the simple exchange of vows they wrote themselves. Warren promised to teach her everything he knew and to learn from her in turn. Mirga promised to stay, not because of a contract or duty, but because she chose him every day. They sealed it with a kiss, and Elise declared it legal enough for frontier folk, and that was that. Mirga Brighttusk became Mirga Emery, and the strangeness of having a new name was just one more change in a year of changes. Winter came, and they settled into the rhythm of the cold months. The garden slept under snow, and their work shifted to repairs and planning, and the 100 small tasks that filled the short days. Warren taught her to read better, sitting by the fire with books borrowed from the Carters, sounding out words and explaining meanings. Mirga, who had learned to read only enough to manage contracts and inventory, discovered she liked stories. The way they transported her to places she had never been, showed her lives she had never imagined. "This one," she said one evening, holding up a book of folklore. "Read this one to me." So Warren read to her, his voice steady and warm, and she listened and thought about how much of the world she still had to discover. It was not frightening anymore. It was exciting. They made love for the first time that winter, a slow and fumbling process that was made easier by the fact that they could laugh at their own uncertainty. Mirga, who had not been touched with anything but professional detachment for 30 years, had to learn her own body as much as his, and Warren was patient and gentle and made sure she knew she could stop at any time. "I do not want to stop," she told him. This is all new. I know. We go at your pace." They figured it out, and it was good, and it got better with practice, and Mirga discovered that her body was capable of joy she had not imagined. Afterwards, lying in their bed with Warren's arm around her and the winter wind howling outside, she felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. "I am happy," she said aloud, testing the words. "Good," Warren murmured, half asleep. "You deserve to be." "I did not know I did." "You do." Spring returned, and with it came the work of planting the orchard. Warren had ordered saplings through a contact in the nearest town, and they arrived in early spring, bare root and waiting. Together, Mirga and Warren spent weeks digging holes, amending soil, planting the young trees in careful rows. Apple, pear, cherry, plum. It would be years before they bore fruit, but that was all right. They had time. 30 years from now, Warren said, straightening from planting the last tree, these will be mature. Imagine standing here with branches overhead, fruit everywhere. Mirga looked at the rows of saplings, still so small and vulnerable. 30 years. Once that had been a prison sentence. Now it was just the future, unfolding one season at a time. "I will be 79, she said. "You will be 68. "Ancient," he agreed, grinning, "creaky and gray. "I look forward to it," and she meant it. She looked forward to decades of this, the slow, patient work of growing things. The satisfaction of harvest, the quiet evenings, the mornings waking up beside him, all of it. Summer brought a surprise. Mirga woke one morning feeling strange, her stomach unsettled, and by midday she was certain. She found Warren in the garden and stood there until he looked up, shading his eyes against the sun. "What is wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned. "I am pregnant." He dropped the hoe. "You are certain?" "Yes." For a moment he just stared at her, and then he whooped and ran to her, picking her up and spinning her around despite her protests. When he set her down, he was grinning so wide it looked like his face might split. "We are having a baby," he said, as if she did not know. "We are." "Are you pleased?" "Pleased? Mirga, I am beyond pleased. I do not even have words." She found herself smiling too, the reality of it sinking in. A baby. She was going to be a mother. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. "I do not know how to be a mother," she said. "Then you will learn, just like you learned everything else." And she did. Elise Carter became her guide through pregnancy, explaining what to expect and bringing gifts of tiny clothes and blankets. Robert built a cradle and delivered it one afternoon with a gruff, "Every baby needs a place to sleep." The pregnancy was not easy. Mirga was an older mother, and orc pregnancies were slightly longer than human ones, but she endured it with the same determination she brought to everything. In late winter, as the world held its breath between seasons, Mirga went into labor. Elise was there and Warren, and after a long night that tested every bit of strength Mirga had, their daughter was born. She was perfect. Small and squalling, with her father's brown hair and her mother's green-tinged skin and eyes that were somewhere between both of them. Warren cried when he held her, tears streaming down his face, and Mirga felt something in her chest expand so much she thought it might burst. "What should we name her?" Warren asked. Mirga looked at the tiny face, the eyes that were already trying to focus, and thought about the journey that had brought them here. From darkness to light, from gold to gardens. "Tessa," she said. "Her name is Tessa." "Tessa Emery," Warren said, trying it out. "It is perfect. She is perfect." They were exhausted and overwhelmed and completely in love, and Mirga realized that this, too, was happiness. Not just the contentment of the garden and the quiet evenings, but the wild, terrifying joy of holding this new life they had made. The years rolled on. Tessa grew into a bright, curious child who loved the garden almost as much as her father did. By the time she was 3, she was helping with the planting, which mostly meant digging holes in random places and getting covered in dirt. Mirga watched her daughter's joy in growing things and felt a bittersweet ache. This was what she had missed, locked in that vault. Not just love or partnership, but the simple pleasure of watching something small become something more. When Tessa was 4, Mirga found herself pregnant again. This time it was easier, her body knowing what to expect, and in the spring she delivered a son they named Rafe. He had his mother's tusks, small but unmistakable, and Warren's easy temperament. Tessa was fascinated by her baby brother, always wanting to help feed him or rock him or sing to him in her high, off-key voice. The homestead thrived. The orchard began to bear fruit, and they added beehives to help with pollination and provide honey. The garden expanded year by year, and they began selling surplus at the market in the nearest town. There were still stares, still whispers about the orc woman and her human family, but there were also customers who came back week after week, who complimented the quality of the produce and asked for advice on their own gardens. Slowly, carefully, they built a reputation not as a scandal but as good farmers who knew their craft. When Mirga was 55 and Warren was 44, they stood together in the orchard one autumn evening, watching Tessa chase Rafe through the rows of trees. The fruit was heavy on the branches, the air smelled of apples and approaching rain, and Mirga felt the deep satisfaction of a harvest well earned. "Do you ever regret it?" Warren asked quietly. "Leaving the vault, giving up that security?" She turned to look at him, this man who had walked into her life with seedlings and flowers and patience. His hair was graying at the temples now, lines at the corners of his eyes from years of smiling. He was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Never," she said. "Not for a single moment." "Good." He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers as he had done 1,000 times before. "Because I want to spend the rest of my life with you, here, growing things." We will need to expand the orchard soon. Tessa wants to plant peaches. Then we will plant peaches, whatever you want. She leaned her head against his shoulder, watching their children play in the golden light, and thought about the girl she had been at 18. The one who had signed a contract to guard gold for 30 years because she had nothing else and nowhere to go. That girl could never have imagined this. This life, this love, this bone-deep sense of belonging. I want this, Mirga said quietly. I want more years of this, as many as we can have. Then that is what we will build, Warren said. One season at a time, and they did. They built a life that was not measured in contracts or confined to corridors, but spread out under open sky and changed with every season. They raised their children and tended their land and grew old together, and every day Mirga woke up and chose it again. Chose him, chose the garden, chose the messy, complicated, beautiful work of living rather than just standing still. She had guarded gold for 30 years, unmoved and unchanging. But the orc woman had left the vault for a man's garden, and in doing so, she had found something worth more than all the treasure in the world. She had found home, years passed in the gentle rhythm of planting and harvest. Tessa grew into a young woman with her mother's strength and her father's patience, and Rafe became a thoughtful boy who loved books as much as dirt under his fingernails. The homestead expanded, not just in size but in reputation. People came from farther and farther away to buy their fruit, their honey, the seeds Warren carefully bred and saved. The prejudice did not disappear, but it mattered less. There were always some who would sneer at the orc woman and her human husband, but there were more who saw them as the Emerys, the family who could make anything grow, who were always willing to help a neighbor, who had built something beautiful and lasting out of empty land. When Mirga was 60, Warren organized a celebration for what he called their Second Life Day, 30 years since she had walked out of the vault. Tessa and Rafe helped prepare a feast, and the Carters came with their grandchildren, and other neighbors from up and down the valley gathered in the orchard. 30 years ago, Warren said, standing with his arm around Mirga's waist, I was working in a courtyard and thought about a woman who stood alone in the dark. I could not stop thinking about her, about how wrong it was that someone so strong should be given nothing to protect but metal. So I brought her flowers, and she let me. And then she let me love her, and then she left everything she knew to take a chance on something new. He turned to Mirga, his eyes bright with tears. You are the bravest person I have ever known. Not because you stood in that vault for 30 years, but because you had the courage to walk away from it. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for choosing this. Mirga, who had never been comfortable with attention, felt her throat tighten. But she had learned over the years to speak what was in her heart. Thank you for teaching me that leaving is not the same as failing, she said. That change is not the same as weakness, that there is more to life than endurance. You gave me a reason to want more, and I am grateful every day. They kissed, and their children groaned good-naturedly, and the neighbors cheered, and the celebration lasted long into the night. Mirga stood in her orchard, surrounded by the people she loved and the land she had helped build, and felt the rightness of it down to her bones. This was what she had been guarding all along, she realized. Not gold, not treasure, but the possibility of this. The seeds of it had been waiting in that dark corridor, waiting for someone to see them and water them and give them light. Warren had done that, but she had chosen to grow. As the years continued, Mirga and Warren began to slow down, their bodies reminding them that they were not young anymore, but they were content. Tessa had taken over much of the orchard work, and Rafe had surprised them all by developing a talent for woodworking, building furniture and tools that people sought from across the region. The homestead would continue, passed down to their children, and their children after that. One evening, when Mirga was 68 and Warren was 57, they sat together on the porch as they had done countless times before. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold, and the orchard rustled in the evening breeze. "I have been thinking," Warren said, his hand in hers. "That is usually dangerous," Mirga said, but she was smiling. "I want to plant one more tree, a cherry tree like the one in the courtyard at Ironridge Hold. Do you remember it?" "I remember. It was beautiful. It was where I first told you I loved you, where you first agreed to come with me. I think we should have one here to remind us." She squeezed his hand. "All right, we will plant a cherry tree." They did together in a spot just visible from the porch. It was a young sapling, and it would be years before it bloomed, but that was all right. They had learned patience together. They had learned that good things take time. Mirga Emery, who had once been Mirga Brighttusk, who had once been the unmovable guardian of gold, sat on her porch and watched the sun set over the land she had helped build. She thought about the girl she had been, the woman she had become, and the long, strange journey between the two. She had guarded gold for 30 years and gained nothing. She had tended a garden for 30 years and gained everything. The difference was not in the work but in the choice, not in standing still but in growing. Warren leaned his head against hers, and she felt the warmth of him, solid and real and beloved. This was her treasure now. This life, this love, this dirt under her fingernails and ache in her back and joy in her heart. She had left the vault for a man's garden. And she would do it again, 1,000 times without hesitation. The cherry tree would bloom in time. Their grandchildren would play beneath it. The seasons would turn and the world would change, but this love, this land, this family would endure. And Mirga, who had spent 30 years learning to be unmoved, had learned something better. She had learned to move with the world, to bend and grow and change. She had learned that the strongest thing a person could be was not immovable but alive. She was alive. And it was enough. It was everything.